Welcome back to Shulva, Sanctum City. Today we're actually not going to be spending all that much time in the city proper. We have a couple of items to pick up, and then we're actually heading into a different area entirely. The reason that I did not get these items last episode is because A, it was running long, and B, they are pretty darn difficult to get, so I wanted to have that bonfire anchor. The thing that makes them difficult to get is that a lot of them are on these moving platforms. They're stationary until you hit the switch, of course, but it still means that you have to maneuver them into the proper position. And sometimes knowing what the proper position is not always easy. It's not especially difficult if you know what you're doing, but when you don't, then there's honestly a little bit more trial and error than I would like involved. You also have to maneuver around and get into the right angles to actually hit the switches in the first place. Now, I would say that it's pretty worth your while to get these, because we just picked up a Thunder Quartz ring plus 3. Plus 3 are DLC only kinds of rings, and they offer really significant bonuses to elemental resistances. Thunder is not really that big of a deal. There aren't that many enemies that use thunder as an attacking type. There are some. But the other ring that we're going to pick up here eventually, anyway, is pretty useful because a lot of enemies do end up using that kind of attack type. Also, you'll have to excuse me, my dog is having a barking fit and it's sort of difficult to concentrate on this. Fortunately, I'm not exactly doing anything particularly interesting right now. Just trying to find the right switches to press. See, even if you know what you're doing, nominally, it can still be difficult to find your way to the right path. And there are these guys sniping at you, so it's probably worth your while if you're going after these treasures to take care of the Sanctum soldiers with bows. Of course, that said, going after the Sanctum soldiers with bows means that you also have to deal with the Sanctum soldiers with lances. It's not especially more difficult, but it is something to consider. As an aside, after playing Bloodborne, the fact that you don't get total invincibility frames during a backstab or a critical hit or a repulsed or whatever you want to call it is super stupid, and I don't know why they made it that way in this game. It's like, okay, if they want to give you a strategic choice of using a powerful attack that leaves you open or not, fine, but if that's the case, then the powerful attack should be easier to pull off. Because you have to kind of jump through some hoops to get to that attack anyway. So I don't see any reason to continue to make it an even riskier gamble. Mostly it's just annoying. Because it does give you reduced damage, so it's like they sort of realized halfway through what a bad idea it was, but they didn't fix it entirely, and it's just one of the things about this game's design that kind of baffles me. I don't believe any other game in this series, or meta-series, or whatever you want to call it, has that feature where you can actually take damage while you're backstabbing or riposting. The animations for those techniques are pretty darn long, so I think that the designers sort of took that into account. I'm not really sure what they were thinking here. Maybe they just really wanted to make it seem that the game was more difficult. And I suppose in some senses it is. Just not in a way I particularly like in a lot of cases. Though then again, I could say the same for Bloodborne. That game has its fair share of baffling design decisions. But I will try not to actually talk about that at any great length, because this is not a Bloodborne thread, this is a Dark Souls 2 thread. And in this thread, I am hopelessly lost with these stupid platforms. I think I've forgotten at this point where the last item I want even is. It also ends up turning out to be kind of worthless, so that's sort of the Sanctum City experience. Lots of goodies and lots of hidden paths, but some of it is crap. Eventually what I decided to do is to simply raise all of the platforms so I can see what I'm doing better. I can fix it once I've found what I wanted to find. Which I just did. Now, this item is a lot more difficult to get than it looks like. It's not on completely even footing with this platform while they're both lowered like this. And I decided to go here for some reason. I think I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything below. It's a bit perilous fighting the soldiers on such a narrow walkway. You don't have a lot of room to dodge their swings. The soldiers are also capable of healing themselves with flasks, but they do it incredibly slowly. Alright, I think that I finally managed to get my shit together here and finally do what I came to do. Here we go. Now that's a pretty perilous, it's not a jump, but it's sort of a slide off the platform. Either way, it's pretty difficult to do without dying. So, if you don't feel particularly enamored with the idea of enchanting every weapon you own with dark forever, then you might want to just give these dark stones a pass. The last thing I want to get before moving on is actually near the beginning of the area. I could have gotten it earlier, but I sort of wanted to save all of this stuff for a collection. Well, it's not the entire video, but a collection session. Simply because it's far enough away from the start of the area that I kind of wanted to have a bonfire anchor before I went and did it. When dealing with these platforms, there is always a possibility of dying. as an aside, don't feel like you always need to lock on. Most of the time I find it pretty helpful, but it's not always the best thing to do, especially when you're facing enemies that are either very mobile or very huge. Both of these qualities tends to fuck with the camera pretty hard. You can aim your attacks by simply adjusting the right joystick, so you don't really ever have to lock on unless you're trying to shoot something from a distance with something you can't aim. And I think that's only throwing weapons. And you might be able to aim even those. I haven't tried it myself. Soldiers are worth quite a few souls, so it might be a little onerous, but taking them out again is certainly worthwhile. Especially if I'm like me and figure out how to do it without taking a bunch of damage for no reason. This last treasure requires a bit of a leap, so I'm putting my Ring of Light protection on for now. Now, fortunately, the platform is raised high enough that you don't actually have to jump. However, that can also be misleading, because if you do jump from up that high, then you're probably going to roll right off the side. Either way, we now have a Dark Quartz Ring +3 to go with our new Thunder Quartz Ring +3. Dark is an element that a lot of enemies end up using against you, so having such a strong defense against that element is really quite helpful. Now, with that out of the way, we can actually proceed to the next area. The Tower of Prayer bonfire serves as a handy shortcut. You can either take a safe route, or you can simply drop down. I opt for the safe route. Which turns out being not really that much safer. Another pair of those. I guess we could sell them to Gavlan. He likes poison stuff. This is ultimately the way to progress. Those lance soldiers on the bridge are going to prove a little difficult. Or not. The dragon that we saw at the beginning of this area seems to not really have much regard for its inhabitants. Then again, if I had a giant stone slab stuck in me, I'd probably be pretty angry about things too. Either way, knowingly or not, he's done us a big favor. He'll only do that once, of course, but the one time he does it is pretty nice. Hidden in this corner here is honestly a sorcery I've found pretty useless. It has a massive intelligence requirement. It doesn't really do that much damage. It's like a laser beam kind of thing, and normally I'm all over that, but it only fires in one direction. It's super slow. I don't know. Maybe I'm using it wrong. In the Dragon Sanctum, the next area, we can faintly hear the echoes of somebody singing. Unlike in the Shrine of Amana, whoever it is must be fairly far away at this point. This introductory room shows us the gimmick to this place, switches you can interact with, much like the gimmick outside. They're a bit different in here because they're wall-mounted, and they don't move platforms, they tend to open doors. Now don't be fooled. These guys might look like player phantasms, but they are not. These are Sanctum Knights, and they will fuck you up. Aside from just being big and strong and fast, which is bad enough, they're also more or less invulnerable. You might be able to harm them with some magic in this state, but I've never tried it and I've never really felt inclined to. Either way, they are immune to physical attacks. So let's beat a hasty retreat for now. I'm not really in the business of fighting invincible enemies. That sounds counterproductive. Fortunately, he doesn't seem to be a particularly tenacious pursuer. Now, naturally, there is a trick to dealing with these guys. Not even the Dark Souls 2 team would actually throw literally invincible enemies at you and expect you to deal. I think. I hope. There you go. Now you might notice that armor set on the table is sort of pulsing this weird bloody ghostly stuff. That is essentially the vessel for the vulnerability of the Sanctum Knights. Once you destroy the armor, they return to a corporeal form and you can kill them. Now, don't think that just because they're solid again means that they're any less dangerous. Their twin blades hit very hard, very fast, and they do a lot of stagger damage as well. Be sure to pick your attacks wisely. As a sort of interesting aside, they are quite vulnerable to poison, unlike the guys outside, who are pretty okay with it. Now, once you destroy one of the possessed armor sets, then you don't have to worry about it again because they will stay destroyed. The knights themselves will respawn, but from now on they will respawn in their solid forms. In addition to hitting hard and fast, they're also pretty darn tough. However, they do drop some nice stuff like free repair powder. The two knights in this room were guarding some substantial treasure. Looks like a good 5 chests worth. arena helm. Well, I do love new masks. And hell yeah, I'll take those. Let's take a look at this thing. Is this legal? I think we're gonna take this off. It just doesn't feel right. There we go. 3 faces are better than 1. This is the Looking Glass Knight helmet. You can actually buy his entire set from Mowlin once you beat him. It's reasonably powerful. It's heavy and expensive, though. There are more soldiers inside the Sanctum itself. However, they have a bit of an added power here. As you can see, they are just literally leaking poison from their bodies. It's sort of gross. Just getting near them at all is hazardous. So a ranged weapon will serve you well in taking them down if you have one. Other than that, they aren't much tougher or stronger than the kind you met outside. They're just more dangerous to get up close to. Especially if you roll right into their overhead swings. But, you know, warmth. Well, I do believe that's a trap. I have an idea. I'll go ahead and wake up all these grumpy-looking guys and completely miss where the pressure plate actually is and fall for my own trap. Thank goodness that this shield has 100% physical reduction. This does give me a nice, I guess, opportunity to show off how warmth does affect enemies and how fighting enemies in the middle of a warmth ball is both annoying and not as bad as it could be. Warmth will heal a lot of damage over time, it's true. However, if you do so much damage at once that they're almost dead by the time you're finished, then you can simply take them out before warmth really becomes a factor. Backstabs are good for this, and if I had the Helix Halberd equipped, I probably could have taken out that guy in one shot flat. However, I am pretty interested in saving durability at this point, so we're going with the Partisan for at least a little bit longer. The chest is also trapped. There are quite a few traps in this dungeon. This is probably one of the few places in the game that I'm comfortable calling a dungeon, because it's pretty dungeon. If I say that word many more times, then it will start to lose meaning. So let's move on. This enemy is a Sanctum Priestess. They like to attack with dark magic. However, they're not particularly mobile or damaging or much of anything, really, so provided that you don't find one in a really inconvenient spot that you can't get to and they bombard you with stuff while you deal with other things, then they're not a big threat. Unlike me, who, even when I am in an advantageous spot and I can bombard people while they're dealing with other things, I'm not a threat at all because my aim is terrible. I guess there are some constants in this world. And I am bad at aiming with an analog stick is one of them. I'm also probably pretty bad at aiming with a mouse, but we can hope, can't we? Unlike the other sorceress-type enemies in the game, like the Amana Priestesses and the Lady of Witches, the Sanctum Priestesses drop some pretty darn nice stuff, like dragon charms. They also have a unique headpiece, but I don't think I get that this time around. I'd probably have to go farming for it, and since it's a caster-oriented thing, I'm not really sure it's worth it. It's goofy looking, though, I'll give it that. This switch on the floor governs the movements of this radial dial thing, which acts as basically a door. You have to hit the switch a couple times to get into a position where you can pass through. You can also use it to block off that Sanctum archer if you so desire. There is, in fact, no illusory wall here. However, there is a secret passage, which is similar but subtly different. We might want to avoid that hole for the time being. We'll probably explore it eventually because it's a place to go, but I do want to continue exploring this floor before involuntarily going down another. There's nothing actually down here except for that semi-hidden switch up on the ceiling. By hitting these two switches, we open up two doors in this side chamber, the one leading into it, and one further down. To get to it, though, we still need to deal with some soldiers. Poison lance soldiers are probably one of the more difficult varieties to deal with, simply because it's hard to kill them quickly. If you manage to get a good flank on them and backstab, then all's the better. But when they turtle up and put their shields up, then you don't really have much recourse except to just stand there and get poisoned. Sort of obnoxious. Fortunately, I have a ton of dragon charms, which will deal with both the damage and the poison. And a replacement right there. Now this time, I'm going to be clever and use a trap to my advantage and not fall for it myself. That pressure plate will activate the spike trap, which is basically instant death to anybody. Unattentive adventurers will probably hit it themselves and proceed down the stairs and get skewered. I sort of mistimed that. He sort of ended up walking into spikes that were already protruding instead of actually getting impaled, so he took less damage. But in the end, the result is the same. Fine work indeed. These chests would be normally accessible even without hitting the switch at the end of the hall, but the central door will not open unless you hit that switch. Plenty of rare upgrade materials to pick from here. And a unique weapon, the Puzzling Stone Sword. I like this weapon a lot. It's not exceptionally powerful, but it has some pretty cool unique features to it. It's a short sword that scales with dexterity very strongly. And it's sort of a precursor to the trick weapons in Bloodborne. Sort of. There aren't any weapons with genuine transformation functionalities in this game, but there are some with diverse enough movesets that it almost seems like it. For instance, the Puzzling Stone Sword is both a whip and a sword. The light attacks give you a fairly standard moveset, while the strong attacks let you desegment the blade, and you've got your very own proto-threaded cane. also just kind of looks cool with the sort of iridescent design. Of course, it's totally unupgraded right now, so it'd probably be best if we switch to something a little stronger. If I can find it in my inventory. Come on. Here we go. There we go. Old friend, Helix Halberd. Back to work. You don't have to worry about hitting that switch on the way back up, because by the time that you've hit it, you're already in the clear. There are two ways to go down the hole. One is the way out, or more appropriately deeper in, and one is a side path filled with disgusting bugs. Now, the side path filled with disgusting bugs is actually quite lucrative, so I guess we're just gonna have to endure it. I forget exactly what I'm looking for here, until I finally remember that what I really want to do is equip the Jester's Tights. We're gonna need to take some force fall damage here, so it'd probably be best if we avoided as much of it as we could. And, you know, completely miss the plunging attack, because the plunging attack is garbage. Now, the red bugs are not especially formidable foes, but when there's this many of them and not a whole lot of room to maneuver thanks to all of the bulb pods, then they can prove to be threatening. It's not just you gotta worry about, it's also your equipment, so you can't just roll into the pods. Like that. Don't do that. Unless you have a lot of repair powder, in which case you can probably get away with doing that once or twice. However, repair powder cannot fix an item that is already broken. It can only restore durability of an item that's still in good shape. It's sort of obnoxious, but them's the breaks. Delicious. Ugh. There's not really any other reason for doing this than being vindictive, but I hate bugs, so death to bug. Bugs are also uniquely, well, not uniquely, but surprisingly weak to poison, given their composition. I would not have expected that to work. I was simply using the arrows for chip damage. The ultimate reward for coming up here is Flynn's ring. Flynn's ring is a special ring that will increase your physical attack power, depending on how much stuff you are carrying. Basically, it scales with how light your build is. So if you're wearing nothing and wielding, say, a dagger, then the bonus you get from Flynn's ring is immense. But if you're like me and you're usually at at weight cap most of the time, then it's not going to serve you very well. Definitely a strong ring, it just needs some consideration before you use it. Now, welcome to the gauntlet. This area is quite harrowing. In a good way. I actually kind of like how it's designed. In addition to being littered with traps and spikes in the floor, there are also a metric fuck-ton of ghost knights. That was a little close. There's also priestesses, but they're sort of not a big deal. You can run past them very easily. Not so much with the ghost knights. There's even more. There are a ton of them here. However, this room contains all of their sarcophagi, or armor sets, or whatever they are. Basically, the procedure here is to get up here as quickly as you can, take out their horcruxes, I guess, phylacteries? Magic immortality MacGuffins? I don't know. Just destroy the things on the wall and sort of kite them around. The nice thing is, due to this setup of this room, a lot of them will simply kill themselves by accidentally leaping into the pit. Which is something that you should definitely be aware of too, but is much more threatening to the knights, because they sort of don't care when they really should. Falling down a bottomless hole will kill you even when you're a ghost. And, you know, even if it didn't, it would at least get them out of our hair. That said, even when you've got them all corporeal, you still have to deal with a bunch of them, and that's not easy. They sort of give you a break in this room by introducing some that actually fire ranged weapons instead of immediately coming after you in melee. It's annoying, but it's a lot less lethal. They're also quite vulnerable to backstabs when they're switching weapons. So if you sort of duck in and out of their range, like if you get close enough while they're in crossbow to get them to switch to melee, get a backstab, then back off and have them switch back, then it's a pretty effective strategy dealing with them fairly painlessly. That said, it's not as effective if there's more of them. Still, it makes encounters with singular ones pretty easy to handle. The Sanctum priestesses have sort of a nasty trick up their sleeves. Sometimes when they die, and I don't know what triggers it, it's just sort of random as far as I can tell, they will leave behind a cloud of poison. Which, you know, that's not something that you really want to have to deal with. It's not really deadly, it's something you need to be mindful of. Because it can be deadly if you do it right next to, say, a Sanctum Knight. Speak of the devil, there's one down there. Now that we can more or less adequately deal with the threats in this room, it's much more open exploration. For our troubles, we get a blood bite ring, which remains to be kind of not all that great, but it's not bad to have. It's not like you can run out of ring space. The Sanctum Knight crossbows are actually pretty powerful, especially when they use that special attack that imbues them with dark bolts. They're still far and away a great deal less dangerous when they're using the crossbows, but these guys are pretty lethal at all ranges. The Helix Halberd, however, makes short work of them. However, they also kind of make short work of the Helix Halberd. I hate the durability system in this game, it's so dumb. If there's one treasure you get in this entire dungeon, it should probably be this one, because you need it to progress. The Dragonstone is a special key of sorts. It is unfortunately not something that turns you into a dragon. Now, we're just about out of time for today, so I'm going to show you one last secret, and then probably break for a bit. This cleverly hidden switch over here will open the hidden doorway up there, and if you have the bravery to jump the gap, which you should, because you can see the ground and you know you're not going to die from that fall, then you are rewarded for your exploration with a bonfire and a Sanctum crossbow. just in case you too wanted in on that sweet Dark Bolt action. This bonfire is quite a godsend after that gauntlet we just had to run. It would have been easier the second time since we wouldn't have had to deal with the thingies, but for now let's just be thankful and take a bit of a rest. I'll see you next time.